2023 was filled with a lot of things, but it was filled most with you whiffing your shots. Oh, let's fucking go, Jets! Hitting your ability, snagging that headshot, being consistent with your mechanical skill is what separates many players from being hard stuck to becoming completely dominant at Overwatch. That's why in this video we're going over 10 tips and misconceptions with aim that will help you never miss a shot in 2024. So let's get into it. But it says that only 20% of you are subscribed, so what are you waiting for? Subscribe right now. Now, the first question that I get asked often is, what is the best sensitivity? Should I have a high sensitivity, a low sensitivity? What is the best one for me? And the reality of it is there isn't one, but with a huge caveat, and it's going to depend on a couple of things. First off, what is the hero that you are using? Some heroes are going to need to operate on different sensitivities. Like if you're playing a character that needs very precise aim, something like Widowmaker, then a lower sensitivity is going to be beneficial to you because you can be more precise with your shots, and you're not going to need to do consistent 180s all the time, and you benefit directly from being that precise. But if you're playing a tank that doesn't need to aim nearly as much, or if you're playing a character that needs to consistently turn around all the time, like a Genji for instance, then having a higher sensitivity on average would probably be better for you. Now in a similar way, controller users, you're going to have very specific settings and sensitivity that is going to be optimized for your hero of choice, so it's going to be a range, and there is a little bit of personal preference. Like for PC users, just because 95% of Widowmaker operate on a relatively low sensitivity, there are a 5% of anomalies that can still perform and perform better on a higher sensitivity. Now for PC users, a dead average sensitivity is about 800 DPI at 5, so anything above that would probably be on the higher end, and everything below that is on the lower end, but like I said, it is a spectrum. Next question is, what equipment is worth buying? What is actually worth the money to make you a better aimer? I would say that in general, high quality things are better, whether it's a mouse, a controller, or anything. But specifically, if you are trying to get better aim, having a great mouse is good, one that matches your hand, and one that is made for FPS. If you have a mouse that has a million buttons on it, yeah, that's maybe easy for you to press, you are applying pressure to that as you are trying to aim, which is going to mess up your aim. Have a mouse that is made for FPS shooters at the very least. Now, as far as frame rate, whether you're on PC or console, you want to have the highest frames that your device allows. So if you're on like an Xbox Series S or whatever, and you have higher frames, you want to be able to actually utilize those frames by having a TV that matches those frames. And there are TVs that can match high level frames. There are monitors that can match high level frames. You want to really ideally, whether you're on PC or console, have the highest frame rate possible and have a monitor or a TV that can match those frames with a low latency rate, because it's going to make the game more buttery smooth, interactions are going to be better, and this is super important, especially for a game like Overwatch that is very fast paced. Now, I'd say that the core breakpoint here is 144 hertz, but anything anywhere near that is good. After that, there are diminishing returns, but getting to 144 hertz or 144 FPS is like life-changing compared to 60 frames. It's crazy. Now, anything else like that, like specialized controllers, keyboards, a mouse pad, these things can be great, but they are going to vary depending on quality and personal preference. I would say that if you don't have the money for it, don't buy it, but if you do, might as well upgrade it over time if Overwatch is a hobby that you're committed to getting better at. Next off is aim trainers. Are they good, bad? What are they for? Should I avoid them? How should I proceed? Now, the very entry-level aim lab stuff that you see, or Kovac stuff, the basic stuff where it's big circles that you're moving and tracking, that's not really going to improve your aim all that much. Like, if you're a brand new player, it could actually be pretty decent, and it could be good for getting the hands warm, warming up, but most players that spend way too much time at that are only getting good at that. They're not getting good at aiming generally. Now, there are ways to use aim labs and Kovacs to get better specific aim, but you need tailored practice, and you need to find something that specifically focuses on the things that you're weak at. Like maybe you're weak at very specific tracking, or maybe you want to practice your flicks or something along those lines. It can be a way to isolate the things you're bad at and practice it, but just make sure that you don't fall into the trap where you start doing the things that are easy, you're worrying too much about your high score, and you're not actually getting better aim or challenging yourself on your weak points, and you're kind of just wasting time. Now, a step past that are like in-game training, like Vaxa, where you're going up against bots with dynamic movement, or even arc aiming, where they're kind of moving in an arc and you're trying to practice through the air. Now, for the arc aiming, It can be okay to get warm, but this is not going to be something that's going to make your aim better because movement is sporadic and you're not practicing up against real movement of players, so it's not very helpful if they're all in fixed positions. And then with Vaxta, it can be a bit helpful, but there is a problem with it. While I do think it can make your mechanical skill better, it doesn't emulate any pressure. And pressure is really important because pressure is going to make your shots harder to hit when you're at risk of dying, and it's going to make it so that your movement becomes sloppy because you're not worried about taking damage. So not having pressure is kind of the biggest downside to a lot of these aim trainers. This is why I used to love tryhard free-for-all back in the day, but it seems like there's no lobbies available, so the next best thing is mainly just comp. If you find a tryhard free-for-all lobby, definitely join it. But if not, then yeah, just running it down in comp is going to be the most reliable way to improve your mechanics over time. Now, the next question I get asked a lot is flicking versus tracking. Which is better? Should I be a tracking aimer or a flicking aimer? And really, this is going to come down to hero-based often, where some characters are basically designated tracking characters. Like Tracer is not a flick character. You're not necessarily flicking with her. Because the aim is continuous, you're going to need to track with that aim, right? But there are other characters that can incorporate flicking elements like Widow, because they're precision shots that happen in intervals, and this is true for like Cass as well and Ashe as well. But these characters can also aim by tracking, and oftentimes tracking your target or putting your crosshair close to where a target will peak, which is good crosshair placement, is going to make it so you have to flick less. And the goal is to be good at flicks, but to not need to use them oftentimes, because as a general rule of thumb, the longer you are flicking or the further away you're flicking, the harder that shot's going to be and the less consistent you're going to be at it. So if you're aiming in one corner and someone peeks you on the right, hitting that flick, that's really hard to do, but being able to hit that flick is really good. So you want to practice flicking, but it isn't always going to be the predominant way you're aiming, although some people that play these precision-based heroes do like to get really consistent at flicking from certain distances, and then they try to set up those shots a lot, and they do it a lot. Now, one thing I want you to take note of is your flick bias. Some people are really good at flicking like from right to left, but really bad at flicking from left to right. Make sure that you look at these things, and that's something that you can kind of work out in a tailored session in aim labs or Kovacs to make sure you're more reliable. Also, in general, people are far better at aiming horizontal from left to right than vertical up and down. That's why fly characters can be really hard to hit, because people aren't used to hitting flicks or even aiming looking up or even down. And this is something that you can also practice in some controlled environments, because in a game you're not getting those reps nearly as much to get good at these things. So it's something to definitely focus on and practice if you want to be able to like two-tap that far every single time. Boom, practice some vertical aim and you're going to be able to do that. The next question that I get a lot is, does movement affect aim? And this is 100% true. The relationship between movement and aim is directly connected. And to prove this point, I want you to go to Widow, try to aim at something, and then start crouch spamming and moving left and right. It's like impossible to aim properly because your movement is directly moving your character all around, and it's not making your shots inaccurate because we're not a tac shooter like Valorant or Counter-Strike in that sense where you can't move and be accurate, but it's making it hard for you to be precise because your movement is messing up your movement of your mouse or your controller aim. So the question is, how do you simultaneously move in a way that makes you accurate while still actually being able to dodge enemy fire and be more survivable? Well, for one, characters with precise aim are going to want to be moving less than characters with tracking or more forgiving aim. As an example, Soldier 76 can move all around, left, right, strafe, and crouch spam, and still be fairly accurate with his bullets, but if you do that with Ashe or Widow, all of a sudden you're sacrificing huge amounts of your aim consistency or your shot consistency for being slightly more survivable, and it's not worth that cost. So it's going to be different depending on the hero you are, and if there's ever a moment when you can't shoot back because you're reloading or something along those lines, maximizing your movement, crouch spamming left and right straying, getting that head to move all around and be hard to headshot is really important so that you can stay alive for your moments to do damage again. Now, for some characters, you're trying to compromise where, like with Cassidy, you do long strafes because those are easier for you to adjust because you're going consistently in one direction, and these long strafes allow you to adjust your aim a lot easier, and especially if you're up against characters that don't need to headshot you or aren't consistently headshotting you, like a Genji spamming Shuriken or an Echo shooting you from distance. These characters are trying to track your movements, so it's not necessary for you to crouch spam left and right because they're just spamming in your general direction. It's not going to dodge that damage reliably, but if you're up against a Widow or something like that, then it's really good to incorporate that. And that's another important aspect. The lethality comparison between you and your enemy can change how you move. Like, I might not spam my crouch and my left-right movement in general when I'm playing casts, but if I'm in the open up against a Widow from longer ranges, it doesn't matter how much my accuracy improves if I just get headshotted and die. They have to hit one shot against me, or maybe two, and I have to hit many shots against them. So it's better to try to increase my survivability there rather than my accuracy, because I'm not going to be more lethal than them from that range. Now, there are also moments where you're not going to want to move at all when you're taking a shot. A great example of this is if you're Widowmaker and you're trying to hit your first shot, no one's actually trying to look at you at all. Oftentimes, you're just trying to literally be standing still so that you maximize your accuracy. And then there's other moments like when you're playing Sojourn, you build up a rail, you're trying to hit a rail shot. It's okay to momentarily stagnate your movement or even stop moving for a second just to try to increase that accuracy. Now, something that I get messaged a lot is, I can't hit anything. What should I do? How do I improve? How do I get to a place where my aim is decent, right? The first thing is create a routine. And this should be a routine that you do before you play every single time, where it could be a combination of warm-up, maybe specific aim training drills, then you're fighting against bots, and then you're going into your games, your comp games consistently. A routine will help you stay on track so that you're consistently doing it, and that's the most important thing. It's freaking consistency, and that is the thing. Aim and building aim is very similar to like working out and building muscle, right? If you go to the gym tomorrow and work out crazy hard, it literally doesn't matter how hard you work tomorrow. The next day, you're not gonna be freaking ripped out with a six-pack from nothing, right? That's just not possible. But if you do it consistently for a year, then you're actually going to be able to see the changes, see the effort that you put together. And that's very similar to how aim training is, where 1 day of aim training, 2 days of practicing your aim, 3 days of focusing on your aim, you're not going to see anything. But after a sea of discipline and a sea of effort, then you look back and you're like, wow, I can freaking aim. And one of the things that I remember way back when, before I was decent at Overwatch, before I was a coach, I was watching freaking IDDQD, who used to be a pro. He's an amazing streamer and aimer. And I was watching him on stream, and I was watching him just flick at the bots from one bot to the next, to the next, to the next, and he wasn't missing any of them. And I went to the training room and I was like, I can't do that at all. When am I ever going to be able to do that? And now that is just comically easy looking at it from the outside looking in. And it's really something where you just have to keep moving forward and you will eventually get to your goal. I promise you. Now, the next thing that people complain about and they want an answer to is they say, I'm really inconsistent with my aim. What do I do to become more consistent? And there are a certain amount of inconsistencies that are inescapable. We're always going to be inconsistent in one way or another, but a way to kind of get past that is by raising your ceiling and your floor of aim. So there's like a minimum threshold of aim after a certain amount of shots that you can raise, and even if you are not always hitting your headshots, you'll still have a higher floor than when you had bad aim, right? So you're just trying to raise your floor higher and higher so that your lows are just not quite as low. Having a really reliable warm-up routine is very important, because then you're going to be mechanically warmed up. You're not going to be missing shots that you know you can hit when you're playing at your maximum output. And I find too often that people kind of throw their first 2 to 4 games at the start of their play session because they're not warm. And if you do a warm-up routine, you could get warmed up in 10 minutes potentially, because you're doing all of these movements very rapidly. You're getting your blood flowing. You're getting all good to freaking go. And you're going to be playing near your normal skill level when you start that first game. Now, level beyond this is create consistency in everything else so that the consistency translates to your game. So what this could be is making sure that you're sitting in the same spot relative to your screen every single time. If you're playing on one side of the couch one time and then the next day you're playing on the floor, that difference can be everything that changes how consistent you're playing. Same thing as if you're too close to the desk or too far away, if your mouse placement isn't starting the same. Whatever it is, you want to minimize all the differences and all the other factors so that you can just focus on the one variable that is changing, which is your aim consistency. And that's a way to build that consistency automatically. But the last major thing we need to talk about is the question that comes to me often is, will I stop climbing if my aim is bad? People afraid that their aim is holding them back from the rank that they really want. And aim undoubtedly is an important factor, but it is one factor of many. If we're going back to the sports analogies, are these athletes playing in the NBA because they're fast? Well, yeah. Because they can jump high? Well, yeah. But is these all the things that make them a good athlete? Well, no. Just because you can aim, just because you can jump high, just because you can run fast, these are all things that add up to making them a good player, but there's a whole other side of the game, how they read the ball, their understanding of the sport in general, and these are all other factors that come into Overwatch as well. It's one factor and it's an important one, but it isn't the end-all be-all. And you can make up having worse than average aim in other regards if you practice and study. But there are going to be some characters that have higher aim floors to even operate. So like Widowmaker, for example, if you don't have any decent aim at all, it's going to be hard to even get the bare minimum value out of Widowmaker. And this doesn't mean you can't play Widowmaker, but it does mean that if you start to learn Widowmaker at the rank you're already in with other characters, you might start throwing some games at first until you get to a certain comfortable level with Widowmaker, even if grinding Widowmaker is the best thing to get better at her. Maybe it's a create another account situation, but it's important to understand that different characters have different mechanical skill ceilings and floors that can affect how much value they get. And some characters get a lot more value at the ceiling, some characters won't get any value towards the floor. Now, to kind of assure you a little bit, I will say that I've never found a person who thinks their aim is really bad actually have that be the reason they can't climb. And I've VOD reviewed a lot. I've had so many VOD reviews where people come to me and they're just like, my aim's terrible. I know it's what's holding me back. And their aim's fucking great. And I think that it's because people that care about their aim automatically have better aim than normal. And they compare themselves to people that are way higher than them in their rank instead of themselves or other people around their rank. And, the people that truly have bad aim are people that probably didn't even click this video at all. So don't worry too much, but always develop your aim further and you're going to be right where you want to be. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, let me know down below and please smash that subscribe button so you support the channel. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.